In the hidden corners of the internet, whispers began to spread. Websites claimed you could hire a professional killer, and all it took was a few clicks and a handful of Bitcoin. At first, it sounded like an urban legend. Anonymous forums, blurry screenshots, posts from users claiming they had hired and received services. But soon, websites appeared with polished interfaces, FAQs, and even fake testimonials. Some believed this was the future of organized crime, where anonymity and cryptocurrency created the perfect storm. Others saw it as nothing more than an elaborate scam. These sites looked convincing. Some even had price lists: $20,000 for a businessman, $50,000 for a politician, and an express package for an extra fee. The more people clicked, the more the myth grew. Was this the rise of a new criminal marketplace, or the perfect scam? Law enforcement quietly began to take notice. Cybercrime units scoured the dark web, trying to separate truth from fiction. What they found was darker, stranger, and far more human than anyone expected. In the months after these sites appeared, reports began to spread. Users on forums claimed their orders had been completed. Stories of quiet men, sudden disappearances, and Bitcoin payments routed through hidden wallets. But when journalists investigated, the truth was different. Recycled photos, identical testimonials, payment addresses that vanished after a few transfers. In one case, a man thought he had paid to eliminate his property manager. Instead, he only lost his life savings to a fraudster. The pattern was clear. No verifiable victims, only empty wallets, and rumors that refused to die. Law enforcement could not ignore it. Cybercrime units around the world began watching, tracing Bitcoin flows, setting up undercover stings. The FBI, Europol, agencies working together, sharing evidence across borders. Agents posed as customers, challenging vendors to prove their deadly services. And when the arrests came, the ones caught were not assassins. They were scammers, running websites from their bedrooms. Servers were seized, wallets were frozen. But for every site that vanished, 3 more appeared to take its place. One of the most infamous examples was a site called Besa Mafia. It promised professional killers worldwide, detailed profiles, glowing testimonials, multiple cryptocurrencies accepted. For months, money poured in, but investigations revealed the truth. Fake identities, false escrow accounts, and one man in Eastern Europe, collecting millions. Victims lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, most of it laundered through mixers and gone forever. Besa Mafia became a cautionary tale, proof that in the dark web, belief itself could be turned into profit. After Besa Mafia collapsed, the legend only grew stronger. New sites appeared with bold names: Hitman Network, Crime Bay, each promising a global army of killers for hire. Their websites looked polished, professional. But behind the facade, it was the same old scam. People sent Bitcoin. No one ever returned. And yet, for those desperate enough, the illusion was impossible to resist. By 2016, investigators had infiltrated several of these networks. Undercover agents created fake accounts. They posed as customers. They posed as hitmen. And what they found was chaos. Forums filled with scammers, people blackmailing each other, users paying deposits, then being exposed and threatened. The dark web hitman economy wasn't a business. It was a trap. A circle of fraud, fear, and paranoia. So why did people keep believing? Because the idea was terrifying and possible. Cryptocurrency promised anonymity. The dark web promised secrecy, and human anger promised demand. Together, it was the perfect recipe, a myth too strong to die. And with every new rumor, with every new hitman site that appeared, the story spread further and deeper into the digital underground. Experts began to speak out. If a real hitman for hire site existed, it wouldn't advertise. No flashy graphics, no public price lists, no testimonials for strangers to read. It would live in hidden channels, private circles, trusted networks where silence meant survival. And that's why investigators say none of the sites exposed so far could ever be real. They were theater, designed only to steal. Journalists digging deeper uncovered something else. Many of the photos on these websites were stolen stock images, faces of random people pulled from the internet, presented as assassins for hire. Some victims later discovered their own pictures listed on these sites, used without consent, branding them as killers they had never been. The fraud wasn't only about money, it was identity theft. It was digital violence. Meanwhile, the scammers adapted. They began offering guarantees, refunds, if a target survived. Customer support chat boxes. Some even claimed partnerships with real cartels, promising international reach and absolute discretion. But behind the curtain, it was one person, one keyboard, one scammer playing God in the shadows. And the more convincing the promises sounded, the more victims lined up to pay. Law enforcement tried to keep up. Europol traced millions in Bitcoin. The FBI ran undercover operations. Some arrests were made, servers were seized. But for every victory, new sites rose from the ashes. The game became endless, a cycle of scams, takedowns, and rebirths. And the myth of the hitman for hire kept thriving in the shadows. For many victims, the shame was unbearable. They had paid for murder. They wanted someone gone, and instead, they were scammed. Few dared to come forward, because admitting the fraud meant admitting their intent. Investigators later said, the silence of these victims was the perfect shield for scammers. No one wanted to confess. They had tried to hire a killer. Psychologists studying the phenomenon called it the perfect scam. It targeted anger, revenge, desperation. When people feel powerless, they look for control, even if that control is an illusion. The dark web hitman myth fed on human emotions. It promised the unthinkable and left only loss. Meanwhile, darknet communities evolved. New marketplaces tried to appear legitimate. Strict rules, feedback systems, even customer service. But beneath the surface, fraud was everywhere. Researchers say more than 90% of so-called murder-for-hire sites were scams from day one. The rest? Likely sting operations, set up by police themselves. And yet, the myth refuses to die. Every few months, a new article surfaces, a new rumor spreads, a new hitman site appears. People click, people wonder, some even pay. And the cycle begins again. It's less about reality and more about the story. A digital ghost tale, retold in endless variations. In rare cases, people who tried to use these sites found themselves trapped twice. First, they lost their money, then their personal details were leaked. Some scammers exposed buyers' names on forums and blackmailed them. Pay us again, or we'll reveal your request to the police. Victims became both criminals and targets. Proof that in the dark web, nothing stays hidden forever. Researchers today say the evidence is overwhelming. There is no proof of a functioning hitman marketplace, no confirmed assassinations, no verified victims. What does exist is fraud and fear and stories that refuse to die. Because the myth is powerful and the truth is far less cinematic. The myth survives because it tells us something about ourselves. Our fear of technology, our fascination with crime, our hunger for control, even through violence. The dark web hitman story isn't really about murder for hire. It's about us, our emotions, our weaknesses, and the price we pay for believing. In the end, The dark web hitman is a ghost story, a digital myth that blends fear, greed, and imagination. The victims are not the so-called targets. They are the ones who believed enough to pay, believed enough to fall, and as long as myths live online, someone, somewhere, will always find a way to turn them into profit. This is the legend of the dark web hitman, and its truth is stranger than fiction. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe for more dark digital mysteries. Until next time, stay curious and stay in the shadows.